Hey creators, Aimon here, and this is where I explore my creative philosophies through video. And today we're talking about framing. So what is framing? Well, framing was introduced to me about a year and a half ago through a mentor, and it was in the context of business. And it's literally just about a frame of mind or a perception. You know, I say this all the time, but perception is reality, and it is. It's literally what you perceive to be true is true. But a word that's really helped me in that situation is framing. So literally think about it like a frame, the way you perceive something, and you're operating within inside that frame. It's literally another word or a reframe of the word perception, and you know how you perceive something to work and to be true. So basically framing affects everything that you do. And what's really powerful is to realize that you actually control that frame. You actually control how you perceive things. And so that way you can make something that's actually really hard really easy just by flicking a switch. Stay tuned and I'll tell you how. Every single day, your mind makes up stories about how things work, about things in your life, about social situations. And it's a really beautiful thing because your mind is doing its job. It's literally throwing thoughts into your mind about your environment in order to protect you and actually push you forward. The thing is, a lot of them aren't really useful. And you know, a lot of these thoughts, because we're not really aware of them, and we're not like looking at every single one of them, they just kind of attach themselves to our identity. And then all of a sudden we operate in a particular frame and we perceive something to work in a particular way. So the reason that your brain does this is so that, you know, it doesn't have to continue having thoughts about that particular thing. Say it's a chair, you know, your brain puts this in a frame, puts it in a box, and it goes, oh, a chair operates like this. This is the use of a chair. And then it puts it in a little box and tucks it away in your brain so you never have to think about it again. So it's really useful, but it also can be really dangerous because it will make up a story and have these thoughts and then identify with these thoughts about a particular thing or about a particular situation, and they may not necessarily be correct, which can be very harmful. So the reason this has really helped me is because, you know, your brain can often get stuck and it can often think that something that you're doing is a little bit too hard or you can't do it, you know? That stat comes to mind where it's like when your brain thinks you're absolutely done, say you're in the gym or something, you're actually only about 40% done. And it's just doing that so you can conserve energy, right? A different example is like when you're actually trying to push further in life and you're trying to do something and maybe you can't get that next job and you're having these limiting beliefs, your brain has just made up this particular story so it can do its best to help you. And all of a sudden you're operating in this frame that you can't push forward. And then all of a sudden you're stuck. And most of the time you're not actually stuck. It's just your brain has told you that you're stuck so that it can protect you, right? So this is where framing comes in, and it's really cool because you get to actually control what you believe about that thing. The problem is it takes a lot of hard work to actually take a step back and do the self-awareness work to see what frame you're actually operating under and whether or not that frame suits you, whether or not that frame is working in your favor, whether or not that frame is actually someone else's frame, or whether it's a frame of your own. Is this making sense? So have you ever been doing something where you've been doing it for quite a while, say it's a sport or something, and you're pretty good at it, right? Then one of your friends comes along and they just crush at it. They're just super good at the sport. And you're like, hold on a second, they've never done this before. Why they're so good at it? I've been doing this for 10 years. Like, why is that person so good at it? And the reason is because they don't have a frame to operate under. They're just going in blind without actually a frame. They know what they want to do, but they don't really know how to get it. And they don't really know the rules and the principles of the frame, of the sport, whatever it may be. And they're just going blind. And because they don't really have a frame to operate under, they just do really well because they don't have these limiting beliefs. It's kind of like because they're naive, their framing is fresh and you know, it hasn't really solidified their beliefs about what's possible under that particular context. So the point of that is that you choose your framing. It just so happens that you have maybe framed something in a particular way without you knowing, and that frame has been solidified and you're operating under that frame, and it's probably someone else's, and you haven't actually taken a step back to question it as to why you're not breaking free from that frame, as to why you're not operating under your own new frame. So a specific example with myself is actually to do with filming. And the frame that I was operating under was that it's weird to film in public. And you know, it's weird because people walk past you and they'll see you and they'll judge you. It turns out exactly what I was saying, my mind had just made that up in order to protect me from a negative social consequence, which was entirely made up. And in fact, there's been people walking past non-stop during this video and they look at me and guess what? I haven't been physically hurt. So I've managed to reframe this idea of filming in public, for example, or filming anywhere really, And that's been a huge thing for me to overcome in the last couple of years. And the reason why I haven't been crushing out videos for 2 years straight now, I've only been doing it for a couple of months because I was under the impression that I couldn't actually film in public, for example. So what happened was I questioned that frame, and then I managed to reframe it to a frame that actually works for me. And now I operate under this new frame in which I am confident in actually filming in public, because I was able to take a step back, realize what the actual limiting belief was and the reason behind that limiting belief. And it turns out it was something that I made up completely. It was a stereotype that I thought was the thing. It's oh, everyone in America does it. It's super normalized for them, but you couldn't do it here. There's no way. Everyone would think you're weird or whatever. But again, that's just one small way in which framing has changed my life in the last year or so. How you doing? See, told you. Everyone just thinks it's normal. Another way framing is really relevant is in social situations. A lot of the time you go out and you'll meet someone and maybe you've met them before and you're operating under a particular frame, whether it's your frame or their frame, So it's funny because a lot of how you see yourself is actually how you think other people see yourself. So it's how you think other people think how you think you see yourself, which is a really interesting and confusing concept. But the reason it's relevant to framing is that you can go into a social situation and think that other people perceive you in a particular way, think that other people frame you in a particular way, and then your behavior is shaped around you operating under that framing. So it might be a little confusing, but basically what I'm saying is when you go into a social situation, if you think someone perceives you to be shy, then you're more likely to actually take on that role and be shy in that social situation. Then all of a sudden, every time you see that person, you think that you're shy, and then you're going to be shy around that person all the time. Maybe shy is a bad example, and maybe you have a relevant example in your life, but basically what I'm saying is that's a frame in which maybe you met that person in a 2-minute window where you were acting a little bit shy, and then all of a sudden you've just taken on that role because they perceive you to be that way and you think that they perceive you to be that way. So every time you interact with them, you act in this particular way, but that's just because your mind has solidified this frame that they think that you're shy. So what you can actually do is take a step back, not too far back, because I'll fall off this log. And there's ants everywhere, and they're big and red, very close to biting me. And so you can take a step back and question that frame. And if you can pinpoint where that frame actually began and why you think that person thinks that you're shy, and so you act shy, you can question that frame and then maybe reframe it to be confident. And then the next time you see that person, you're actually really confident and they react to you differently, which proves that your mind just made up this frame. And it just solidified this frame and it put you in a box. To zoom out a little bit, basically the mind is really powerful, and a lot of the time it's trying to protect you, which is awesome, but also a lot of the time it really damages you, and it's not intending to do that. It just so happens that our biology hasn't caught up to the modern world. But that's a video for another time. So I first picked this idea up from a business mentor of mine, shout out Nick Koyama. And then it became a pretty common theme in my life and kept popping up. You know how sometimes you just keep seeing the same kind of idea pop up in different places in your life, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube video or a mentor. And then you finally get the hint that, you know what, maybe something's trying to tell me something here. Maybe I need to pay attention to this theme and dive into it a little bit deeper, maybe integrate it into my life. That's kind of what happened. And as I said, it was initially in a business context, but I kind of pulled back, zoomed out, and realized that I could use it in my everyday life. And it's funny because it's literally the same thing as perception, or, it's just a way of thinking about something really. But for some reason, framing it in the way of framing, literally just changing the language of it, has allowed me to be more self-aware and has allowed me to see it for what it is much more commonly in my life. So look, I don't know if that really helps you in particular, but for some reason it's definitely helped me, and that's why I decided to make this video, put it out there, because sometimes it's so crazy that it's literally just the language that you use, that you just change something around and then all of a sudden it changes a huge part of your life. So I guess that's it. Framing has changed my life quite a bit, and it's interesting because it allows me to have more self-awareness. And really that's what this whole life thing is about. If you don't have self-awareness, then you don't really know what you're doing. You don't really know where you're going. You don't really know why you're doing particular things. So it's really important to kind of analyze your own behavior, why you're doing something and how it could be better. And that's what self-development is all about, really. And that's why I've taken on this hashtag creative philosophy. So if any of this has made any sense to you, please let me know below. If it hasn't made sense to you, also please let me know below. Yeah, I thought I'd just share it because it's definitely affected my life, and hopefully that reframing in language can affect yours. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Creative Philosophy. And yeah, let me know what you think about this below. I'd appreciate any comments and likes. It really helps me grow. Click that notification button or whatever, man. Don't. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.